Hello, welcome to Cerulean Arts Gallery. Today we're speaking with Maria Lindenfeldar in conjunction with her Cerulean Arts Collective exhibition, which is on view now through November 9th. Hello, Maria.
Hello, Mike.
Thanks for
Thank you.
being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the beautiful show. It's hung beautifully. I was really
Oh,
excited to see it.
thank you. So this is your first Cerulean show.
It is. Yeah,
So congratulations.
thank you. It was a really big day for me.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's a really wonderful show. So tell us about it.
Okay, so it is primarily a still life show and also a little bit of a landscape. It's arranged around or inspired by Virginia Woolf's novel, The Waves, which she wrote in 1931. And it was an experimental form. So it was helpful to me just to organize my thoughts around it. There was a quote that a quote that really struck me, which was talking about in the beginning, there was the nursery and a window that looked onto a garden, and beyond that, the sea. So I actually grew up at the beach and remember it being in my cozy house, feeling very secure, looking out the windows at the beautiful light that's down there. And then also, we lived a couple blocks from the ocean. So there was this giant world out there. So I had sort of like my little self-contained world and then this sort of big natural world. So when I saw that quote, I thought, oh, this kind of, it explains a little bit about how I feel about my environment. And then I looked up the book, and it turned out that the book is about perception, about sense of self, the fluidity of self, all the different selves we have. And I had been doing a lot of still life from the same perspective, but varying how it actually looks. So, changing the colors that were on my palette, or whether I used a brush or a knife. Sometimes I just do grayscale like this, value studies. And so I just decided to kind of expand on doing that, and ended up making two groupings of still life that 6 versions of each representing these characters that were in the novel. And then, interestingly, in that novel, there's a prose poem about the ocean and looking at it over time, over the course of a single day. And so I did a sort of haystack kind of thing, like looking at the exact same scene, which is Ocean Grove, New Jersey pier. The jetty, which is right off the pier. I looked at that multiple times to try to think about, like, how does it look at different times of the day, the exact same scene. And so then I just kept going with this theme and ended up with the exhibition that's in front of you.
So how did you come to art in the first place?
Well, I've just always loved doing it since I was little. I actually was a government major in college, but I took so many painting classes that I was a painting minor sort of by accident by the time I was a senior. And I actually, right out of college, I went to the New York Academy of Art, started an MFA, because in college, when I was there, it was very much sort of abstract expressionist, and there wasn't a lot of technique. I was a pretty decent, could draw pretty well, but I didn't really learn a lot about painting technique. So I started at the New York Academy of Art. I left there for personal reasons, and then took a kind of hiatus from painting. I came back actually, and you were my first teacher.
Yes, that's right. We met at the Pennsylvania Academy. Mhm.
Yes, that's right. And so you were teaching me actually still life, and you were the first person who taught me about value and how form can almost how, if you just look at value, you end up with really interesting shapes compositionally, like by just looking at, say, all of the really dark darks. And that was really interesting to me. And at that time, I was working as a graphic designer. So that whole idea of how you compose in 2D by using light and dark shapes that create interesting pattern is very much a part of how I work. So I came back to it that way, and I did that. Continuing ed, PAFA, for many years. I completed the certificate program through continuing ed. And then about 5 years ago, I decided I wanted to be more serious. So I did an atelier called the Modern Color Atelier at Gage Academy of Art. And that gave me a lot of the methods that I'm using now. So I start with analytical drawings for the most part, just in graphite. And then I always set up my still lifes, and I'm a little like obsessive about setting them up. So I'll move them, a quarter of an inch, I'll open a window, I'll close a window, I'll swap out one object for the other. And then I'll photograph them. And I do that value study thing that you taught me. So I'll do just a value study, black and white, some usually oil paint study, small study. And then I'll do a temperature study, which is really fun just to study the light. And the whole time I'm thinking about design and structure. So yeah, and then I'll go back in and once I find something or a pattern I like, I'll start doing it more larger scale oil painting. Although these are not oil paintings, these are oil pastels. So I can tell you a little bit about these later too, but
Yeah, let me actually skip back to the beginning of the seascape here, which is a little different.
Yeah. So this was a challenge about, back in the olden times when I was in college and doing all those large canvas abstract expressionist things. I wasn't afraid of a big canvas. But then once I had a lot more technique, I found it really difficult to work large scale. So this was partially an experiment in trying to work larger scale and getting enough paint on it that there was still some energy left, and going back to those big like sweeping gestures, which were in my DNA but had been lost for a long time. And this one, my first sketches were from life, and these were done in the studio from a photograph. But the smaller ones are the original versions of those were from life. I almost always draw from life first.
Mhm.
And in this case, I only had one easel at the time, so I used 3 canvases. And then once I had them going well enough and I had to unify them, I mean, I sketched them all out, so there was a unified composition, but once they got to a certain level of thickness almost, I lined them up and started working on them as a true triptych. And then framed them as a single piece so that they were a single image.
So who's on your mind artistically? Who are your influences?
Okay, well, obviously Morandi. I love Morandi. And what I love about Morandi is just this sort of like very direct perspective, and also how the shapes blend one to another, and the method of returning to the same subject over and over again. And compositionally, they're just beautiful. And it's interesting because I'm also very interested in high contrast, light and dark. And so for that, I'm really interested in Bonnard. I think that backlit window and the objects having color in them, but being very, very dark in value is really interesting to me. So even with these jetties, I'm interested in this big dark shape, with some kind of lights around it. So that's not very Morandi-like because it's pretty high contrast. And then my all-time favorite artist is Richard Diebenkorn. And for that reason, I mean, what I love about him, well, there are many, many things, but I love that there's this geometric structure under everything, even if it's representational. It's really rigorous. And then his paint handling is so beautiful, and it just seems so spontaneous, even though it's not. So that tension between, being very controlled and being very loose is really interesting to me.
So do you find the rigor, I mean, you're pretty systematic about like your setup and process that allows you to be spontaneous?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm definitely the kind of person that left to my own devices would sort of float away. I'm not likely to, I'm not likely to be disciplined or systematic or anything like that. So the issue with that is that you can go into the studio and make a lot of little drawings on tiny pieces of paper and never turn them into something significant or build up a body of work. Or so that's really been the challenge for me for the past 2 years. And I think this is actually my first true body of work. So So the system made it possible, like also that touchstone of the novel.
Right.
But it's interesting. I found that you almost have to paint for a certain amount of time before you can come up with your system, or else your system runs you, you know?
Yeah, you just sort of have to plow into it and
Yeah.
start to feel what's natural.
Yeah. And then this stuff, these sketches that are oil pastel and also a little bit of crayon and graphite are fun because I do these almost entirely like in a frenzy, and then I scrape off what I've done, and that stains the paper. It's on like an embossed acrylic paper. So when I scrape it off, it sort of sticks. And that color, that underpainting is always going to be there in whatever color I initially put in. And then I can decide whether or not I want to go in super, super thick. And I use like Caran d'Ache crayons, and then I use some colored pencils, and sometimes it's just oil pastel. And it's turned into this method that really feels like painting. And on paper, which I love. You know, that's the other thing I wanted to say is that in my other life or my related life, I'm a book designer and a creative director. And so I love paper. I designed books for 20 years, and I love drawing. And I used to think that those things could be separate, but once I discovered this Arches oil paper and this crazy method of working with the oil pastel, or even oils, I put graphite back into oils. I draw on top, like I'll scrape something off, I'll draw on top, and I realized I could do all those things at once, which is really does just feel very natural.
Well, it's a blurry line between drawing and painting, so
Yeah.
which is nice. Well, congratulations on your show, Maria.
Yeah, thank
It's
you.
fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
Look
Hope to get to do
forward,
it again.
look forward to the next one. So this show is up through November 9th. We hope people come down to check it out. Everything's also available on the website, ceruleanarts.com. So thanks again, Maria, for being here, and have a great rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.